Alright, so today I'm going to be showing you how to install a aftermarket stereo into a 2008 Honda CR-V. So this will apply to 2007 to 2011 CR-Vs. It should be pretty straightforward. So here it's out of the bag, but I have a mounting kit. So this is our dash kit that will allow us to install our stereo with all the right trim pieces. This is an antenna adapter. And we have our stereo harness, and this is optional, but I'm going to also be putting in a rear view camera setup as well. And we have here a Sony, I believe it's an XAV-AX100 stereo. So this was previously in my 2007 Subaru Legacy. This car is my wife's car, but since that car is gone now, I'm going to be putting this into her car now. So this is everything that you'll need, and it's pretty straightforward. So I already have the stereo already mounted up onto the mounting kit. This kit comes, so it's a kit from a company called American International. So it uses both single DIN and dual DIN setups, double DIN setups. So if you go with a single DIN, I'll show you here, you have a little cubby, then you also have your trim piece for your stereo as well. If you don't do that, there's a section that you actually have to cut off. So it's this middle section here that'll prevent you from, it runs basically across the middle of the stereo piece, dividing it into an upper single DIN and then a cubby area. So if you're going to put in a double DIN unit, you need to remove that piece. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. You just undo that, and then you have your side pieces here. One thing to note, the screws that came with the Sony unit actually were too shallow. So these are the ones that come with the actual mounting kit itself. It does mention to use these supplied stereo bolts from your head unit if possible, but since mine were too shallow, these ones were longer, so I ended up using those. So that's all ready to go. Basically, the next thing that we have to do is wiring. So here is the harness from the actual stereo, so the Sony one, and this is the one that's going to the car. So we just need to basically match up these wires to these, and then we'll be good to go. Alright, so here I have the stereo basically kind of preliminarily wired up. So kind of one thing that I did in the past was I took the parking brake sensor. So this basically, you're supposed to wire it to the actual parking brake light. So when that light is on, aka when the parking brake is engaged, you won't be able to use full functionality of the stereo. Instead of actually going through the hassle and wiring that, I always just ground it, so it always just thinks that basically the circuit's okay. And kind of we have everything wired up to the Sony harness with the actual harness adapter for a SIP going to the actual car. And then here's our antenna harness as well too, that we have wired as well. And the only other thing that you might not need, but in this case I'm doing as well, is the rear backup mirror. Not mirror, the backup camera. So that guy has, first we have our wire, that's our video input. So right there, the yellow guy. Then we also have a signal wire. That one, there's a separate wire that comes from the Sony harness, that's for our reverse. So that's kind of our trigger. So I have that wired there. And if you kind of follow this guy, so this is kind of the extension, so it allows the whole thing to run the length of the car. And this is the actual end that'll plug into the camera itself. So here we have the actual camera plug, and here we have a red wire and a black wire. So red wire is our power, black wire is our ground. So what you want to do here, if you want basically your camera just to come on when the car is in reverse, you can wire these to the actual reverse lights. So just hook up the red to the power and then black to the ground, and that means that whenever your car's in reverse, aka the reverse lights turn on, then your reverse camera will be activated and it'll show up on the stereo. So next we'll go to the car and throw this in. The interior of the car, so this is an LX CR-V. This should be the same process for basically any of the other trims as well too. You want to take out basically certain pieces here. So our climate control section is coming out. This top vent section is going to pop up, and that's going to expose our screws that are actually holding the head unit in the car. But in order to pop this out, as you can see, our shift lever is kind of in the way. So if you look on the right hand side here, there's a cover. If you take a small flathead screwdriver or trim remover tool and kind of work your way out, then that'll expose a little hole there. So you can kind of go in there with a screwdriver and kind of just move it out of the way, and that should give you enough leverage to basically put the car into a lower gear. So in doing so, that's going to give you the room to take out this panel. If your car isn't on a level surface, or even if it is, I would recommend putting on the parking brake so it doesn't roll away. Climate control section. If you look basically on the side of the knobs here, there's a small little slot that'll be big enough for a flathead screwdriver, a small one, to go in. So if you pry on either side and kind of pull out, the whole unit should come off. Then you just unplug the connector. So once you have the climate control basically slid off the front, you're gonna have this gray connector here. The tab to depress to release it is on the bottom. And you also have this tab here. It's a plastic trim piece, kind of locks into place. You just have to squeeze both sides and then the whole thing should slide out. Then once you do that, you can remove the actual climate control piece. So the next thing here, basically, again, there's kind of a tab for this upper vent section on the back there. So you want to pry there, and then everything else should pop off, and we'll show you the connector for the light for the passenger indicator, and then also the hazard button. Up in two pieces, you have your more frontal area here. That's this flat guy. Basically what you want to do is just kind of pry it up and it'll just come apart. It's just held in with clips. And then for the actual vent portion, it's held in just with clips as well too, but if your car is like this, it was held on very tight. So, just be mindful, like don't use too much force in case you might break something. And then here's this, basically the connector for the switch. There's just a tab to depress it. You pull that out and then you're good to go. So it's a little hard to see, but on some light you can see it. So at the top here we got 2 bolts, and then we have the same thing in the bottom. Can't see it here, but it's kind of the identical thing at the bottom as well. So these are Phillip heads, or I believe they're also 8mm. So you can use a ratchet on them. I always recommend using a ratchet because I find these Phillip heads tend to strip out very easily. So that's what we'll take out next. Basically, after you have the 4 screws, the 2 on the top and the 2 on the bottom, removed from the head unit, you just kind of go around the side of the trim, basically where the stereo is. And again, lots of pop clips, or like not pop clips, but just tabs in this car. So you kind of have to pull those forward to release them. And then you have to lower it. There's this bracket here, so you have to lower the head unit down and slide it out. On this car, there were 3 connectors. So this is the antenna connector. This was on the passenger side. There's a tab, basically, when it's plugged in, it'll be on the left-hand side of the car. So you just depress that. Here's our actual stereo pin. So it's a tab on the top to release. And then last but not least, we had another connector as well too. There were 3 in total. And apparently I can't find the other one right now. If we look, there's actually multiple provisions there. So the one connector that I'm confusing, so this white one wasn't actually used. I'm not too sure what that one's for, but there's this one that'll be on the very left-hand side of the car. That actually goes to our aux cable. So basically, you unplug those, and then we're ready to install the new one. So we have our antenna piece. That's going to go into our very rightmost one for the antenna, and then our actual factory stereo will plug into the main guy here. That's for the stereo portion. It looks pretty similar to the one for the climate control, but just remember it's the one on the top. Installed now, so as you can see, we got our Sony XAV-AX100 deck here, and with the trim piece, everything kind of fitting as it should. So kind of what I'm going to show you now is, so for here, I don't know if you can see up there, but I have the mic set up there, just above the rear view mirror. And I have the backup camera installed as well too. So what I did with those 2 wires, basically, if you kind of follow underneath the dash of the car, sorry you can't really see it, but I have the wires fed through there. And then the trim pieces along the side, So basically I removed those to feed the wire for the backup camera. And then for the trim, basically your A-pillar trim, I removed that and then kind of tucked the wire for the mic up into the headliner. So just to kind of keep it a cleaner install. I'll show you the back. So basically, followed the trim piece, went through both of the doors, and then kind of went from this back portion here, ran the wire up along here, and then as you can see right here, I have the ground and the power wire for the backup camera. And again, kind of snaking the trim all the way through until when we pull down, there's a backup camera right there. So everything is kind of held in with pop clips, so it's relatively easy to remove. The only thing I will tell you for the back hatch in particular, you want to take out this middle section here. See there's a divot where you can use a flathead screwdriver to remove the center portion. And then you take off the two side pieces on either side. And I find when you work your way basically where the wiper area is, pop this entire black panel down, but you can only loosen this like back part and the sides. Here it's actually bolted in, so on either side of the handle there's basically a provision to put in a screwdriver again right in this corner on either side. Take those off and you'll see a 10mm bolt, and you undo those and then the rest of the whole assembly will come off. So that's how you kind of feed your wire in. But yeah, so I'm just going to give you a quick demo on what everything looks like in the car. Through its normal kind of startup screen. So one thing I will mention while this is loading up, so picture of my old Legacy as the background still, for the reverse camera. So how to wire that? There's actually I believe it's a purple wire coming off of the harness for the stereo itself. That one, it's a reverse trigger wire. So what you want to do is you want to wire that to your reverse lights. So whenever your reverse lights turn on, this rear view camera will be activated. So as you can see, well, we're in park right now, we go into reverse, and boom, we have our backup system there showing. So what I did, and this is applicable to the Honda CR-V, obviously it's different depending on what car you run it to, but underneath the dash, there's the interior fuse panel. I'm going to try to show it to you right now. It's kind of hard to see. So as you can see there, we have our interior fuse panel, and way up at the top, you might be able to see this red wire that snakes up there. But way at the top, there's a connector where there's a brown wire. That brown wire is actually our trigger for the reverse lights. It's a real big pain in the ass to get to. I kind of wish there was something easier. You could alternatively run basically a trigger wire all the way to the back of the car and wire it into the taillights themselves directly for the reverse lights, but that's kind of a lot of wire to add, so I opted not to do that. But yeah, so other than that, this install was actually relatively painless, so hopefully that helps you out, and kind of great way to modernize the interior. I know this car was very basic, so and the other thing that I will mention is our USB cable. So in my previous car, the Legacy, I actually had just the cable kind of coming out the center console up to the driver's seat. But in this car, there's not really a great place to do that. So what I did was I ran it into the glove box. So this car actually has two separate glove boxes, one at the top, it's a very small one, one at the bottom. But this one is big enough for a phone. So I actually ran the USB cable into here. So you can plug your phone and then kind of hide it and everything's all hidden so you're not distracted. So that's kind of the route that I went with. But yeah, so hopefully that helps you out. And you know, it's just a good way to update your interior.